one choice isn't right. Choice isn't right. Choice isn't right.
The first time I had a psychotic episode, my father took me to a priest and asked him to exorcise me.
All right.
And the priest said, take her to a psychiatrist.
Oh, a good priest then.
No, and I was an inpatient in one of the old institutions in Scotland, where they were still using treatments like insulin chromotherapy and semi-narcosis, both of which I experienced. It was truly, truly horrible. Plus, I was trying to sit my finals at the same time, so it was a big fight between me and the psychiatrist, who also, I guess, I can't put this on record, the guy is dead, thought it was his right to have sex with the patients.
Really?
Yes, I resisted him, but he did. I wanted to forget about it. I didn't, at that point in time, want to do anything to oppose it or resist it. I just wanted to forget about it. I came to London in 1971 and had a job, an academic job, but I was quite often in hospital. My first diagnosis was hysterical personality disorder. I had a Victorian diagnosis, but it was changed to bipolar anyway, as if this kind of encapsulates your life. And then to cut a long story short, I was medically retired from that job. My partner saw an ad in Time Out for a group called Camden Mental Health Consortium, which said it was a group of patients and families, and I think they used the word allies, but I'm not sure. He said, why don't you go? At that point in time, I was 24/7 lying in front of my gas fire doing nothing. So I went to this meeting, and a woman stood up and described experiences that I had had mostly in A&E, through self-harm, like being stitched up with an anaesthetic torture, manipulative torture, attention seeking. And she described exactly what I'd experienced, and then she said, this is an abuse of my civil rights. And I'm like, and so that was a sort of moment when the lens changed. It was just the beginning of a long journey. But I did get then very involved in that group through that, especially by a person called Peter Campbell. I got involved in Survivors Speak Out as well, which was the national organisation. And we were doing a range of very different things. So on the one hand, I had been in Free and Barnet Hospital, and it was a time of hospital closures. So one of the things that the group was doing was simply trying to make sure that people who spent their whole lives in this institution were settled somewhere decent with decent support. So very mainstreamish. Everything from that to opposing Marjorie Wallace's poster campaign. He thinks he's Jesus, you think he's violent, the doctors think he's okay. It's kind of, we had demonstrations in the underground and things like that, and we had a group about coming off neuroleptic. Some had physical disabilities. They did build a new building for people who were wheelchair users. And I remember a meeting where I was making some suggestions about, because the housing and the support were two different organisations, and how they should be working together. And this guy said, why should I listen to a manic depressive like you, he said. Nobody will say that anymore, but I don't think that sentiment's gone away. I mean, I knew from hospitalisations that were quite lengthy, there's a kind of underground world in the hospital where people, they teach you how not to take the pills, and they teach you how to work the system, and if you want to get out, how to play by. There's just a kind of, it's kind of underground solidarity that makes it possible for you to exist in those places. A crucial moment was the Paddington Day Hospital, where they wanted to make some changes which neither the staff nor the service users liked, so they had a strike. It was all very complicated. There are 2 books written about this, and they take entirely opposing views. One of the books takes the view that this was the beginning of the Mental Patients Union in 1973. The other book takes the view that this was total chaos, mad people just kind of running riot. So it's 2 very different perspectives on the same thing. It was very, very complicated, but I do think it was one of the very important instigators of the Mental Patients Union, which was like the first modern youth movement in the UK. The significant names at the time for me were Peter Campbell, Alan Leader, Mike Lawson, Emma Barnes, who was the one who described her experience in A&E, Anne Plum, who was from Manchester and rightly always complained that Survivors Speak Out was very London-based. There are a load of others, but and Andrew Roberts made this website that charts. There were 2 small. Well, actually, Scotland had the first group, the Scottish Mental Patients Union, and then a year later there was a Mental Patients Union in England, and there was something called CAPO, the Campaign Against Psychiatric Oppression, which I really never had much to do with. I mean, my own activity was very local, and I'm kind of really into that. What happens locally is really important, and you don't, like you do here, do research and then spread it out everywhere. You actually work out what's happening locally with people. Just thinking through what that experience had meant. Why did I buy into that model of who I was? And try to understand why people do. They accept they've got a diagnosis and they want to take the meds, and I did do that. And then just basically a long journey that was both, it was political, it was activist, it was practical, but it's thought stuff, because I'm relentlessly an academic, I can't help it. I guess the other thing is that after those 2 groups, local groups started to emerge, and I think somebody counted at 86 or 87. Another important event was the Mind Conference in Kensington Town Hall. I think that was 86, and there was also a conference in Brighton. So things were like moving. Somebody counted there were like 15 local service user groups in England in 1986, and in 2003 somebody did a survey and reckoned there were 300 plus. So there was a growth of local groups, and to begin with they were all very, well, I wouldn't say they were all anti-psychiatry, because it wasn't all about psychiatry. Some of it was about how can we help each other outside that framework. And then it got a bit problematic, I think, because there was a strong push that these groups should be formalised as charities, which itself had problems because mad people aren't supposed to be on the board of trustees of charities. And there were advantages and disadvantages to formalising those in informal groups. Then people started to get money from local authorities, mostly, or trusts. And that was at the time of Thatcher and purchaser providers split and all that business. And some of those were very enabling, but some of them were very constraining. Because if you were funded by an organisation, you couldn't really, you could criticise it, but you couldn't just take it to bits in public.
So some of the health trusts became funders, and it was difficult to criticise.
Exactly. But most of the money in the early days, in the late 80s, early 90s, was coming from local authorities, I think. And some charities were funding organisations like Survivors Speak Out, but it became more and more legitimised. And I think, and in the process of becoming legitimised and having all these contracts and So it lost some of its radical edge. That's my view anyway.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it gave you opportunities and money to do things, and so you thought you could change things through that route, but it was also putting very strong constraints on what you could change. I don't think it was as strong as with the disability movement, but yes, definitely, closure of the institutions was something that people wanted. And there was a moment, but the idea was that you would have community centres, and it wouldn't just be mad people who would go there, but local people. But then in, what was it, 99? The National Service Framework for Mental Health came out, and there were, I think, 6 service users on that, but they had a really bad time, especially the black service users, who were treated badly by the white service users and treated badly by the black professionals. They had a really shit time. I don't think that the service user survivors who were involved in the National Service Framework thought they made any difference at all. They just felt that they were very badly treated, but the 2 black women in particular felt that they were very badly treated. Whether, I don't know if they legitimised this, I think it would have happened anyway. I think it was on the agenda. It was a form of, it's a way of saving money for a start, and also narrowing the field of who was going to get services under this so-called care in the community.
We mentioned the anti-psychiatry wing of the movement. What were their objectives, really?
Well, it's very variable. I mean, everything from change within the structures that exist. Like, for example, we very early on persuaded the local inpatient unit after the institutions had closed. I mean, this sounds so like minor and mild these days, but we persuaded them to write leaflets for the side effects of each drug that they used on the ward and in the community, and that people would be given those leaflets, which sounds like nah, but actually it was something, because you were swallowing this stuff. You had no idea. You know, you could have. I remember being given one drug, and I couldn't stay still. I kept moving about, and it was another patient who told me, that's a haloperidol that's doing that to you. It's not you. It's a side effect of the drug. And the doctor told me. Andrew Roberts is of the view, and I think he's probably right, that Lang, Esterson, those people, they were interested in a different form of treatment. They weren't interested in listening to patients and ex-patients who were objecting to psychiatry. Those so-called antidepressants, so-called targeting serotonin, which they don't, the prescriptions for those kinds of medications, and anxiolytics as well, has absolutely rocketed. Big pharma, like Johnson Clegg and Pfizer and Eli Lilly, have pulled out of central nervous system drug development. They're not doing it anymore. They pulled out about 4 years ago. So there's no new drugs on the market, but what they are doing, and now these things are generic, so they're very cheap. They're using old drugs more. I mean, I think that the issue with neuroleptics, I was on neuroleptics for nearly 40 years, and I decided I would stop. And it was really, really difficult. It was really difficult. So I cut by a very small amount each time. And each time I cut amount, I didn't sleep for 6 weeks. And I was quite manic. I was very lucky, because this is what most people say when people come off the drugs, they relapse. And they kind of look like that. But I was very lucky because my partner knows a lot about neuroscience, and he says, actually, you're not relapsing, your brain's a homeostatic system and it's readjusting. Some of these drugs have very serious side effects. So olanzapine, the one I was just talking about, can cause diabetes. And I was in a group. It was actually organised by the health service, but it was called psychoeducation, and we'd get some rubbish at the beginning about relapse or how would you go to Australia and manage it, stuff like that. But then after that, it was just peer support, and there were people in that group who had developed diabetes because of olanzapine. There were 3 of them, and they were so angry. But they were also so relieved to be with other people that had, because nobody had told them. And they didn't really know why. They'd made the connection, but not in a full and comprehensive way. And I get so angry because you have lots of people in this institution doing mental and physical health care. So they have this idea that people who have serious mental illness sort of couch potatoes and take no exercise. And there's this problem that they have diabetes, and they talk about this endlessly, and they never ever say that some of the people with diabetes have it because of taking olanzapine. So they know perfectly well that olanzapine causes diabetes, but they will never articulate it. Somebody else has to say, look, one of these conditions that you're talking about is actually iatrogenic. It's caused by the drug you're giving people. When I came here, I got asked to be involved in various projects, as well as doing we did a fantastic one in ECT. And I thought, why am I making no difference? Is it just because I'm alone? Or why am I making a difference? And it took me a long time to realise, and I didn't do it by myself, I did it by talking to other people. I'm making no difference because they're not changing the agenda.
Right.
They're not changing the methods of the research. They're not changing the way they recruit participants to research. They're not changing the way they analyse the data. Everything's set in stone. And so you can only tinker around the edges. We've got knowledge. We have knowledge. We have an expertise of our conditions. We don't all agree. We're differently positioned. We have different multiple disadvantages. You know, I have physical disabilities, but I'm quite privileged. You know, I'm educated. I'm a professor. I'm also privileged. Other people have multiple disadvantages. I have a few. So, and all that counts. But I guess the mission now is, for me anyway, is to say, look, we have this knowledge, differently configured for different people, and you are not taking account of it. You don't. It doesn't count as expertise for you. You think the only expert knowledge that exists is your knowledge. And actually, if you want to understand mental distress, you've got to step outside your model, listen to the expertise of people who have first-hand experience of these conditions and services, or avoiding services, which is what some people do. You've got to understand that knowledge and also other kinds of knowledge. Stop looking just at the individual and taking them out of their social context. You have to understand how people live with these conditions. It's not just, you come to the doctor, they write a script and that's the end of the story. No, people have to live with it, and you have to understand what the disadvantages are, how they operate, and how people are also resilient, how are communities resilient. Not about individuals being resilient, it's about building resilient communities.
And there are statistics that show that, such as the black community has a much higher percentage of mental health problems than others.
It's not just a higher percentage of diagnosis of psychosis, it's much higher rates of sectioning, much higher rates of compulsory treatment, less access to talking treatments such as they are these days, being brought to hospital by the police. They just get a different route into hospital, and they get the worst deal in terms of coercion. And it's in the CRPD Implementation Committee report from
2016.
It's much more involvement. Sometimes people put my name on papers to legitimate their papers. So they're using the fact that they've got a user in the author list as a form of legitimation of their ideas. So it's very tricky, and some people are quite happy to do involvement in research or involvement in policies, involvement in practice. Other people, I think, have come to the conclusion that for reasons like I described in research, but also in policy, you're just not making any difference. So if you're going to make a difference, actually you have to be radical. We have to go back, revert to the old days in a new context. Well, the first thing I would say is stop austerity. Stop putting people with mental health issues through these DWP assessments, stop putting them through PIP assessment, stop reducing ESA to the same level of job seekers and allowing somebody that will work for 3 weeks as opposed to somebody that will work forever, 73 quid a week. And the impact it's had on the public narrative about racism and all of that, I just think if you stop that and reconfigure the economy so that mental health was not just in health, but it was a part of social care, and it was in education. It stops being just a health issue, because there's all this talk about stigma and it's time to talk and all that kind of thing, and I just think that is so bland. Plus, it never, you have the celebrities, you have the footballers, you're supposed to talk to people when they've come back after an episode. Nobody ever talks about what's going on in the sharp end. With psychiatric hospitals these days, are total chaos. I was in one in March. I came back after a 3-hour leave and couldn't get into the building, and was rented into the building, got in my ward with 20 security staff in the ward because it was just so completely chaotic. But nobody talks about that. They talk about depression and anxiety. And, I don't think we should be talking about stigma. I think we should be talking about injustice. And not just injustice, for me anyway, not just injustice in terms of poverty and other structural factors like the ones that I've mentioned, but actually injustice at the level of knowledge, that our knowledge is not taken seriously. And that's what I want to see. I want policymakers to stop listening only to psychiatrists and start listening to people who nobody'd like to live with these conditions and can tell you what needs to change. Okay, the government doesn't want to stop austerity, but the narrative's out there now. This is not history. The Special Rapporteur on Poverty, 3 weeks ago, just damned the government. The CRPD report damned the government for austerity. There were 2 individual cases brought by DPAC and the mental health system where they won. It's not a secret that austerity is impacting badly on people's mental health, but nobody is asking the community, such as it is, what do they want to see change? So there is an organisation, but it's so strapped for cash, and people are working themselves, called the National Survivor and User Network. And what they've identified, and I think there's going to be a campaign about this, they're a network of networks, right? They're a group, their membership is collectivities, not individuals. And they looked at their membership, I think it was last year or the year before, and found that 25% of those groups had closed. And that is continuing to happen. So the picture seems to be, and this is definitely something that I would argue for change, that a lot of money is going to the big charities like Mind and Rethink to provide services on the part of government. Small local organisations that people depend on, because they're local, because you can go there, you can talk to people, are being closed at a massive rate because the money is going to the big charities. And I really think that needs to be reversed. I want to see, but this is just me because of what I do, I want to see all the knowledge we've accumulated over the years, historical knowledge, current knowledge, with different ways of supporting people outside the mainstream system, all of that codified and taken seriously by policymakers. And that is not like an anti-stigma campaign. That's well, somebody in Australia calls it, is epistemic injustice, that they just will not take our knowledge seriously because mad people can't be rational. It's the first time in any piece of legislation that people designated mad have been given equal rights to everybody else. It's the very first time. You look at the European Bill of Rights, if it's called the Bill of Rights, and it excludes some people with mental illness from the right to liberty. And lots of these conventions that give rights to people, they do that, they exclude. So they always put it as some people with mental illness, by which they mean you can be locked up against your will.
Yeah. And there are quite a few countries that have placed reservations, particularly against Article 12 for people with mental health issues.
Oh God.
So that is still there, but at least they've got to come out in the open and
But
write
I think what's interesting, and we could go on endlessly about this, is that there are people who are stuck on Article 12 and the general comment, they're absolutely stuck on it. But in some countries in the global south, they're not that. They don't think it's unimportant, but it's not their focus of attention. Because I don't think the concept of rights is homogenous across the CRPD. So they're much more interested in things like Article 19, community included, 40, the right to educate, this kind of fixing social conditions, rather than this focus on individual capacity.